Welcome to the Grow and Learn podcast, your go-to source for expertise and insights on a variety of topics: business growth, leadership, technology, personal and business finance, and more. We've curated a vast network of business experts ready to address your company's most pressing challenges. Reach out to us for more information or schedule a call at grownlearn.org to explore how we can support you. Welcome to Grow and Learn. This is Zorina. My guest today is a very renowned person. He's been a contributor to Forbes. He's been a contributor to Harvard Business School cases. He's been in the business of guiding leaders and executive teams forward in their thinking and in their business success. I'm speaking to Jay Weiser, who is a consultant and a business coach and a speaker and a strategist. I've been following him for about a month now on LinkedIn, and I'm really impressed by the depth of his knowledge and all the concepts that he puts out. So I'm gladly welcoming him today to Grow and Learn. Hello, Jay.
Hey, thank you very much. The feeling is mutual. I've been, watching your content as well, and it's nice to see, there's some nice meshing there and alignment.
Yeah, indeed. Jay, you've been in the business of consulting, strategy consulting, and leadership consulting for more than 25 years. What is the thing you would say that over the years hasn't evolved and has always stayed the same? Like, people evolve, socio-economic circumstances evolve, relationships evolve, but what in humanity, in leadership, hasn't changed?
I think it's the element of communications. I mean, communications has been a challenge. I mean, going back to when I first started consulting, whether or not leaders were talking to each other, how they were sharing information, being open, being honest, thinking about what's best for the company versus what's best for their department or themselves individually. I mean, that's been a consistent thread throughout, good times and bad times. That issue is still there.
Mm-hmm. So is it simply the communication or the type of character of the person, whether what their attitude is?
I think it's a little bit of, all of that. It's interesting. I was reading an article recently from Russell Reynolds talking about how they do assessments and different characteristics, and they talk about personality. I think definitely personality comes in. Capabilities. And, one of the key capabilities is, are people very narrow in terms of, just one functional expertise? Or do they have, kind of that YT structure where they're able to integrate and connect is really important. But not everybody does that because they're thinking about their own area. How do I look good?
Yeah.
So capabilities come in. I think trust comes in. And that all those things factor into communications, factor into relationship building, how people work together. So I don't think it's any one thing, but communications is one of the key ways it manifests itself,
Right.
in terms of people having comfort, sharing with each other, having their ideas debated, discussed, challenged. That all involves communication, involves dialogue. It was interesting. I was talking to an chief human resources officer, top 6 supermarket in the US. And we were building out their strategy map and a scorecard. And I said to them, because they were focusing on costs and how their department is a cost, I said, well, you guys support growth. And they're like, what do we have to do with growth? And I'm like, you hire all the people. You hire the people who work in the stores. You hire the customer service people. You hire the people behind the deli counter or meat counter. If you don't hire right, you're not going to get growth. If you're not providing the right learning and development opportunities, you're not getting growth. And they're like, Well, we hadn't thought about that before. So, it was making that connection or talking with marketing and like, what do we have to do with HR? And it's like, well, how do they recruit people? How do they promote the employee value proposition? Why would people want to work here?
Yeah.
So, it's making those connections, because if you're in silos, you don't have that flexibility. You don't have that collaboration, at all the different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, when it comes down to the store, that's where all the functions come together, because that's where the customers are. So, it's marketing, it's HR, it's IT, it's finance, it's store management. So it doesn't mean everybody has to be a generalist. And I use the term strategic generalist because that's kind of at the top, top of the T. That to me is one of the most valuable things a leader can be, versus, a lot of people think about generalists and they say, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
It's somebody who's kind of like a utility player. They can sit at this station or that station or that station. I'm talking about at a leadership team level, which is really different.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, very often, and you might have heard the phrase when people say, stay in your lane.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come in my lane. And I wrote a post recently and I said, staying in your lane works if you're in a swimming race competition. People have to stay in their lanes. But if you're playing water polo, the last thing you want to do is stay in one position.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to remember what game you're playing.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you work mostly with HR executives, HR teams, or generally on all level, any executive function?
Really any. So I've done a lot of work at an enterprise level, business unit level, and functional level. And, I've done work with CFOs, office of the CFO, CIOs, marketing, supply chain. And typically when I'm working with a function, it's as part of an overall enterprise effort, because you need that alignment across the different parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm. And you have coined the 5 superpowers, leadership superpowers. How this whole thing came about? How did you design this, and what's behind it?
So part of the idea came out of the fact that leaders for a long time have been struggling. They're caught off guard. They're surprised. They're unprepared. They're unaware. And I started saying, why is that? And that was happening before COVID. It got 10 times worse since then. I mean, with COVID, and then, the continual pile on of disruptions and crises. And they could be following all the best practices, in terms of setting goals and aligning lists and communicating and having a vision and a strategy, but something was still missing. So over the course of about 6 months, I'm like, okay, so what's missing? And as different ideas popped into my head, I basically came up with the 5 leadership superpowers. Each of the superpowers represents a tension that leaders need to manage. And it's not saying I can do this or I can do that. Each of the superpowers involves doing both together. So the first tension is between the present and the future. So people very often say, I can't think about the future. I'm so focused on the present. It's so crazy. That's all I can do. When things calm down, I'll focus on the future. Well, I don't know, about you. Do you see things calming down anytime soon?
Calm down in terms of what?
More stability, more certainty. The reason I was asking the question is that very often leaders, as I said, are so focused on the future. They say when things get stable, when things don't change as much, then I'll have time to focus on the future. And I was saying my view is that's not going to happen. There's always change. There's always disruption. The world is so interconnected that you have to be prepared for the fact that that's the way it's going to be. That's why you have to connect the present and future. You have to understand the future from different perspectives. You have to know when to pull back, look at the big picture, when to zoom in, look at details, and at the same time, have foresight, because you're looking at trends, you're looking at signals, you're integrating that information in terms of what might happen. If we learned a lesson during COVID, a barge got stuck in the Suez Canal and the world gagged because it upset supply chains around the world. That's something in the future we need to be aware of. What could disrupt the supply chain? That's a signal we need to watch out for. It's also about looking at different scenarios. So that's present futurist.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just concerned that, and also not concerned, but there is this thing that we cannot predict possibly everything. We can think of a few scenarios that are most likely. And now in the case of what happened, what we already know is a possibility with the Suez Canal interrupting supply chains, we can think in similar situations, but something completely out of the ordinary may show up. So
sure,
we can think of we can juggle only a number of small possibilities.
But the point is to, one, make sure. I mean, there are some things that we should see coming. If we're looking, I think very often people are like, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to that. I'm not going to pay attention to that. Okay. When in reality, they should. When people said they never could have been prepared for COVID, I agree. Nobody could be perfectly prepared. But we've been through H1N1. We've been through the bird flu. We've been through a variety of different things. They've been taught. I read an article in 2003. I happened to read it about a month or two into COVID, and it talked about enterprise resilience in a networked world. And I'm like, this article is great, in terms of how they look at risk, how functions need to work together, what we need to be prepared for. I'm like, this is really timely. And then I looked at the date of the article. It was in 2003. And in one of the cases they talked about was what would happen in a pandemic. So we should have seen some of that coming, or possible. And certainly as things started to happen, we should have started to think about it. So, I think part of this is getting away from being reactive. Sometimes there's a level of what I'll call willful ignorance. It's kind of like, if we don't pay attention to it, it won't hurt us. And, we're not going to foresee everything, but it's about that heightened level of awareness. And getting away from thinking, and this goes to one of the other superpowers I'll talk about in a moment, about being a prepared risk taker. But that is, don't just think about events, because we only think about what we know. Instead, how about looking at the drivers of performance? So if you're the head of a hotel chain, one of the drivers of performance is occupancy. Whether or not people are staying at the hotel, that drives performance. So if I was to ask you what impacts occupancy, just think off the top of your head, what are some things that impact occupancy at a major hotel?
I would say economic stability, because people don't travel when they don't have money. That's the number one, I would say. I mean, other than pandemics that we've now seen, but
Sure.
but this was unexpected. This was like unprecedented in our modern world, right?
Sure.
So other than that, the regular things is financial crisis is the first thing, and possibly some significant weather impacts like typhoons, tsunamis, unprecedented weather conditions.
So when you think about economic conditions, if it's a major hotel, what does that affect? So one, people don't go on vacation, right?
Yeah.
Two, if there are economic issues, companies are cutting back on expenses, so people don't go to conferences.
Mm-hmm.
Conferences drive food and beverages and extra ancillary services. So if you start to think about, well, what are some other risks? Terrorism, civil unrest, but there are a lot of things that are tied to occupancy that are not event specific.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start to think about what's the risk to occupancy, you're going to think about other things than if you just talk about specific risks, an earthquake, a tornado.
But this is generally the job of a risk manager, to assess the potential risks of an industry, of a company also, and how these can be mitigated. Like I have personally gone through risk management reports and worked with the risk managers, so I know that they do take into account such things because they coordinated with strategy. So I used to work in strategy, and I know that they do have all of these risks and how to potentially mitigate them included.
But is it only the risk function? Very often that's in finance. But do they think about customer risk? They go to your brand, or they go to another brand. They go to a Hilton, or they go to a Marriott.
Right. No, they don't go to such detail about, no.
So if you think about that, risk management isn't just in the risk function. It can be in marketing. It can be a risk in HR about talent, staffing, leadership development. So that's one of the things I think about being a prepared risk taker.
Yeah.
Which is getting away from, risks in finance. That's what they do. No. All leaders have a responsibility to be paying attention to risks, listening to what people on the front line say, because very often it's the folks that are dealing with customers day in, day out are the ones that hear everything. But they're very often the people least listen to. So, let me just build on that for a minute, because when you think about being a prepared risk taker, that's the third superpower.
Sorry, wasn't this the second one? The first one is present futurist, then we
present futurist. I'll come back to number two. That's experienced learner. But since we're talking about risk, so prepared risk taker. The first thing is to acknowledge that risk is a part of business, and you can't grow if you're playing defense, if you're playing not to lose. You want to be playing to win. Playing to win means you're trying new things, you're innovating, but it's taking smart risks, piloting something, experimenting, making small bets. But part of the challenge is a lot of times people go, but change is risky. So if I don't change, it's not risky. Well, in today's world, when things are changing so fast, not changing is very risky, but it's the one thing that often is not discussed. It's not made explicit. So I think part of being a prepared risk taker is being risk aware and saying, okay, so yeah, change is going to be hard, but if I don't change, here's what could possibly happen. And as you think about that, you might actually find out the risk of changing is less than the risk of not changing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the other thing that's interesting, when you were looking at risk management, does risk management ever get into how do we get better prepared? Does risk management do resilience and think about how do we become more robust? In most cases,
in my experience, it's just written on paper and nothing happens after this document is produced.
That's the problem, because nobody is thinking about, well, what do we do if that happens? And it's people say, why should I invest in preparedness? And they say, what's the return of doing that? The thing that's interesting, I could ask the opposite question and say, what happens when you're not prepared? Think about what's gone on over the last 5 years. Think about what was the cost of Blockbuster not being prepared for competition, or Nokia not being prepared for smartphones. Preparedness isn't, again, specific events, because a lot can happen that's not a natural or physical disaster. You know, it could be damage to your brand's reputation. It could be a competitor comes out with a completely new business model. Those, you know, how do you prepare for that? Well, you pay attention to signals, you do research. It's part of being a present futurist. Mm-hmm. It's also, you know, I think we talked earlier about communications, having a communications plan for when something happens so that you have a template, something you can pull off the shelf.
Yeah.
And work with. It's kind of like
it's really military strategy in the end, preparing for all kinds of scenarios. Like the army needs to be ready. I mean, strategy comes from the military, so it is in the end similar things people have to think about.
Yeah, and you think, for example, I'm not going to remember where in Italy, but let's think about San Francisco for a minute. San Francisco has earthquakes. Mm-hmm. I would hope the hotel that I'm in would have a plan for what to do if there's an earthquake. What do they tell people to do? What backup things do they have? So companies just need to think about that. I work with a supermarket chain. They had a plan. What do we do if a new competitor opens a store nearby ours? So they had a plan. They're going to do more advertising. They're going to have special promotions. They're going to kind of spy a little bit to the other, just thinking a little bit ahead. So that's what prepared risk taker is about.
Isn't this a privilege of very large companies who have the budget to hire additional workforce to work on strategy? I mean, thinking about it, so few companies have a proper strategy team. At most, they have 1-2 people, maybe a small team, but these are large companies in the end. And so to be able to develop all of these scenarios and preparedness is a privilege to only large companies, it seems. What do you think?
You know, I think, even in smaller companies, as you think about this, so first of all, I think the worst thing you can do is have, a strategy function that's up in an ivory tower, disconnected from the business.
Right.
So it's not everybody has a role. I think when it comes to strategy, the role is going to be different depending on the level and where you sit. If I'm a mid-sized company, $20-30 million, when it comes to strategy and thinking about risk, that leadership team can get together. You don't need a strategist. I mean,
Right.
if you have the marketing person and the operations person, the financial person, the HR person. I mean, that could be 3 people, that could be 6 or 7 people, whatever the number is. They can spend some time talking about this, having the discussion, thinking about a couple of different scenarios, at least makes people more aware.
Yeah.
And they can think about, well, it probably makes sense to, do we have a backup location to back up our data?
Mm-hmm.
What would we do if we lost power? So if you're in Florida, they have a lot of hurricanes. You should have a power backup plan.
Talking about power, it's not only on the level of companies, but this preparedness is also on the level of society and humanity as a whole. And since there's been these solar flares in the past, when was it, like 2-3 weeks ago, and it recently came to my attention that there's a company building on-ground alternative to satellites, because the satellites will be the first thing to go, yeah, in the case of a solar flare. So that's a good thing, there are companies thinking about that. Yeah.
But I mean, you think about yourself. I have a fire extinguisher in my house. I have a smoke detector in my house.
Yeah.
I keep extra water around. You might, have extra food in your pantry. When our children were little, we had an emergency contact list on the refrigerator. Those are basic preparedness steps. We would tell the kids, we have 2 stories. When they hear the smoke alarm, what are they supposed to do? Companies need to be thinking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of being a prepared risk taker can apply to an individual, a family, a company, any of those situations.
Makes sense. All right. Shall we move to the next one? The experienced risk taker.
Experienced learner. Yes.
A learner, was it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So experienced learner. The first thing leaders do when something gets rough is they go back to what they know. They say, this worked before, so I'm going to try it again. And what people found, I think, during COVID and especially now with just all the technology changes, different types of work environments, very often what worked before doesn't work now. So the first thing, a lot of leaders do, well, if it didn't work now, I'm going to try it harder. And eventually, hopefully, they come to the conclusion, okay, that isn't relevant anymore. There are certain things we thought we knew that we need to let go of. And we need to be open to learning. And it's not just people below us learning, it's leaders learning, being curious, asking questions, fostering debate, providing a psychologically safe environment for people to have a discussion without being nervous about, well, should I say that? I can't say that. That's going to make that person look bad. If there's psychological safety, people can be open. They can share ideas. They can get bad news out there so it can be dealt with versus, hiding it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the leader doing that, it's fostering that across the leadership team and across the organization. From executives, the top level, getting training and education and finding new ways to think and look at things all the way down to the front line. The problem is, and you've probably seen this, that again, when things get rough, when there's rougher economic times, what's the first thing they cut?
The HR budget for education.
And usually when they do that, they cut across the board.
Right.
They don't think about, where do I need to invest more? Where should I invest less? And now is the time we need to be building those capabilities so that we can survive and thrive in the future. And very often we cut off our nose to spite our faces.
Mm-hmm.
So that's experienced learner.
But theoretically, where should they cut? If they can't cut sales because they need to survive, where else should they cut? If it's a cutthroat environment and it requires them to downsize.
That the first response is to downsize. And who do they downsize? Do they downsize the people who aren't adding value? Do you downsize across the board? Do you, again, it's figuring out where's the right place.
Yeah.
Very often executives look down versus looking across. Maybe there's an executive that's not carrying their weight. Maybe there's a function that you actually need to upskill and you need to invest more in versus something you might be able to outsource. What is strategically important to drive success? And, people say, oh, cut across the board. Well, if you're trying to grow sales, cutting customer service is probably a bad idea. But a lot of times that's what happens. And sales does a great job. They sell more stuff. But, we don't have customer service people. So now the wait times are long. The technology doesn't work. And you end up having churn. So it's like running on a hamster wheel. You're running really, really fast, but you're not going anywhere. So I think instead of thinking about cutting, I very often say, think about aligning. Because it's where do those investments need to be made and where can you cut back? So do it smart. For example, maybe the accounts payable people don't need training, but the customer service people do, because they're going to drive value. So it's making those strategic choices.
Absolutely. So that was the experienced learner.
Yes.
We have 2 more superpowers.
So number 4 is being a strategic executor. And it's really about balancing strategy and operations. Very often, companies get into a firefighting mode, focusing on operations. We're going to make things more efficient. We need to drive productivity. We'll deal with strategy later. Well, later never seems to come. And if you're only focusing on operations, you're very busy. But where are you going? Strategy provides that direction. If you only have folks doing strategy, coming up with all these concepts, but you can't execute, that's not good either. So it's about the integration of strategy and operations. Going back to making cuts, very often decisions are made in the short term without thinking about long-term implications. So if we look at a lot of the airlines, when COVID hit, they started firing and terminating people like crazy. They didn't think about employee relations. They didn't think about, what would happen later. Whereas Delta Airlines, which happens to be based where I am in Atlanta, one of the things they talked about, their CEO talked about 3 things. 1, take care of the customers and take care of our employees. Job number one. Job number two, protect cash. We don't know how long this crisis, this pandemic is going to last. Number three, which most executives have never said this, which is protect the future. And because of that thinking, they didn't just terminate people. They offered early retirement. They had furloughs. They stayed in constant communication with their employees who were furloughed. As a result, when travel resumed, their people came back faster than the other places. Their people were still engaged and valued the company.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, they've been the best airline 3 years in a row.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
They're performing financially well. Their customer scores are high. Financially, they've shared, I think last year, it was several hundred million, if not more, in profit sharing with their employees.
Mm-hmm.
So employees saw the benefit of that effort. It was a win-win. Customers won, Delta shareholders won, Delta employees won.
Yeah.
So that's
Great example.
being a strategic executor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any?
I have no questions. Great example.
Okay. So the fifth superpower, which I think especially in a complex, uncertain environment is essential, and that is being an accountable collaborator. You and I were talking about silos earlier. Most things that we have to address today, the challenges we have to address, involve multiple departments. Mm. So that involves some level of collaboration to come up, to diagnose the situation, to consider alternatives, come up with and implement a solution. One function, very few things can one function alone solve the problems and challenges, even the opportunities that we face that we want to take advantage of. So it's recognizing that, and it's about forming a team with the right people, with the right capabilities. It doesn't mean it has to be all senior people, junior people. It's, what is the right mix that's fit for purpose and fit for the future? It's about focusing that team on what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, and showing them, giving them the resources, empowering and enabling them to be able to deliver, or most likely deliver, that outcome. Leadership, their role is to get out of the way, not to micromanage, to support the team by making sure they're properly resourced, by making sure that leaders are getting obstacles out of the way, not becoming obstacles. And when that happens, the team doesn't have a problem saying we're accountable for that outcome, because they're set up for success. Mm-hmm. And, if you think about like a special forces team, military sends that team in a crisis. They know what their mission is. They know individuals can't succeed alone. They have to have the right team that communicates effectively, that trusts each other, knows they can rely on each other. And that's what they're charged with. Either the mission succeeds or it doesn't. But it's not like, oh, Joe, you did a really good job, parachuting in, but it was arrested. That doesn't matter. So
I'm just thinking to have such informal task teams. Basically, the whole organizational structure and the processes within this organization need to be kind of reworked because it has to do with also incentives and who responds to whom and the allocation of budgets. And like the whole wheel revolves around where the people are assigned to, allocated to. So it doesn't this point require an entire reorganization?
So my answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, do you know of many reorganizations that have been successful?
For the time being, for a few years, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do know some.
Are most successful?
I suppose not.
Exactly. Reorganization takes time. There's all the politics. So a lot of times these teams need to operate outside of the normal structure. If you think about the military, when they pull a special forces team, you might have one person from this division, who does tanks, and another person who's from the parachute division, and another person who's from a technology division. The point is, it's the right people.
Right,
One person.
but I have, how, sorry for interrupting, just, how I've experienced it. It is indeed shown in the organizational structure with a dotted line. So this person responds to, let's say, the project manager or whatever with a dotted line. So there is some sort of a formal assignment still. And also in terms of incentives and how the bonuses are given at the end of the year, performance management still needs to account for the work of these people that are informally working on a task.
But see, we've got to think differently. If that's what we think about, then we're fighting for resources. People are pulled in different directions. Do I do what's right for the company, or do I do what's right for my team leader? So
that's right.
It goes back to prioritization. It goes back to focus. And part of the reason I say take it out of the chain of command, so to speak, because that's what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. So you don't get held up by politics. You don't get held up by conflicting interests. The interest is what's the objective and the outcome you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And have that project report back to one senior leader or report back to that leadership team. So this is different than a matrix, because a matrix becomes very cumbersome. I'm working for two bosses. I'm working for three bosses. I need to think about this for this boss and this for that boss. You need to think about what's best for the business and what's best for the customer, and make the organization work to fit that. Don't be constrained by the organization. That's the first thing we say is, oh, I can't do that. I need to check with my manager. I can't do that. I need to check with this vice president over our department. Is to be able to operate outside of the chain. Now, it doesn't mean.
Have you seen this effectively work? Like this requires a change of culture, mindset, the mindset of the leadership mostly. Have you seen this work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, if I think about this supermarket chain, when COVID hit, one of their problems was staff. Who's going to work in the store? Mm. The people who were older, people who were retired, who were cashiers and working in the front or stocking shelves, they're like, I'm 60, I'm 55, I'm 60, I'm 70. I don't want to come into the store because of COVID. We're going to get sick. We're at risk. Kids who were, teens who are working in the store, their parents are like, I don't want you going there. I want you home. So they had to rethink completely how they were going to staff the stores. So they had to pull a team together, store managers, people in operations, people in customer service, people in risk management. It used to take them 4 or 5 weeks to hire somebody. They did a background check. They did a drug screening. They had people take all these aptitude tests. They had to be interviewed. It was this whole process. They needed people to work tomorrow. They needed people to work next week.
Mm-hmm.
So that team had to come up with a solution. And that team was charged with putting that together. So, like I said, with special forces, it's the corporate equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like your rapid response team.
And so what knowledge or structures or advice did they have up front in order to be able to set up such a task force, such a task team?
So first of all, this supermarket being based in Florida, they had teams like this who dealt with hurricanes. So Florida has storms. So they knew if this is going to happen, they had a playbook. So they're saying, okay, so let's think about this. Obviously, on a bigger scale, who do we need to pull together? Who are the right people? When it comes to a hurricane, typically there's an IT person. There's somebody from logistics, because typically if there's a hurricane, people lose power. What do they need? Batteries, water, things to eat that don't require power. The stores in the area of the hurricane, they need generators, because if they lose power, how do they stay open? So they put that stuff out there in advance. So it's the same type thing, because if there was a hurricane and you said, okay, we're going to work just in our silos, it'd be a disaster.
Right.
So the hardest thing is to change structure, to change incentives.
Your microphone went off.
That
I cannot hear you.
And has to operate outside.
It's breaking.
So maybe I'm sorry.
No, it says my internet connection is
I don't know.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I will cut this out.
I don't know if that's on my. What I was saying, the hardest thing is changing structure and incentives. That takes a lot. When we have a crisis, when you're dealing with a disruption, the one thing we don't have is time. So if you think about these structures, it become period to pull a team quickly together that's empowered and enabled, who can make decisions and who can act. Now, as time goes on, there might be some more integrated things. And going back to incentives, I think over time, those need to change. Because instead of incentives just based on individual performance or department performance, the first thing should be company performance. You need company performance first before any of the other things happen. Because just because you have a great sales team, but everything else is off, that's not successful.
Yeah, but isn't this the way normally performance packages are anyhow designed? First, you look at the company performance, and then it trickles down to departments and individuals. At least this is what I don't know if that's the normal thing.
Well, and it's also, think about the employee experience. If you're in silos, the employee experience is going to be horrible because they get frustrated. They can't do their jobs. So it's not just monetary compensation. It's, do you like where you're working? Are you
Yeah.
able to do your job? Are you valued? Do you feel like you're contributing? Those are important just as well. And leaders need to be thinking about those things,
Mm-hmm.
especially where talent's an issue. So the 5: present futurist, experienced learner, prepared risk taker, strategic executor, and accountable collaborator. What's interesting, all 5 support and reinforce the other.
Yeah.
So a leadership team ideally has all 5, and that eliminates a lot of blind spots and a lot of risks.
Mm-hmm.
It increases the organization's probability of success. Nothing's a guarantee, but it's increasing the probability.
Yeah.
And it leads to better performance. It leads to customers getting greater value. Employees get greater value. Ecosystem partners benefit. Communities benefit. And when all that happens, the shareholders benefit a lot.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So,
That's usually the major concern. Do the shareholders still benefit if we're introducing some changes? Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, if the shareholders benefit, but the employees don't, or the customers don't, that's not sustainable.
No. Right. This was very interesting. I love the examples that you gave, and it definitely made sense when you talked about the grocery chain that was the prepared risk taker in Florida, but actually was also able to configure this task force fast. So I can see how they're contributing to each other, all of these superpowers. Very interesting.
I mean, if you, I don't, are you familiar with Home Depot?
Yeah.
Same thing, when there's a storm or, something happens, what do? They make sure the right stores have the right supplies.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about, I'm trying to think, I mean, some of the supply chain stuff, how partners, sometimes even competitors, collaborate because there might be a shared resource they both need, with partners. That, it's how all the players in the ecosystem need to work together.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the European Union as example. They all have to collaborate for the benefit of all of the countries together. It's that type of coordination. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's better than not having it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Also regarding the prepared, what was it, the present futurist or the prepared risk taker? I can't remember. I do not know where exactly it fits. I suppose in both of them. I think in the first one, prepared futurist, when again the supply chain effects of COVID, when it hit everywhere, but particularly e-commerce businesses that get their products from China, and so they couldn't get them anymore. And I know that a lot of them, especially in Europe, but also in the US, were looking to diversify and get producers, for example, for clothes or other household items, but it's simply not possible anymore, and not, at least not in such a short time span, to diversify.
Well, and the thing is, if you think about present futurists for a minute, if e-commerce is growing. So there was a comment made earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about e-commerce on the phone versus e-commerce on a laptop, and how the stores do tracking, and that particularly on larger purchases, very often people are going to their laptop because they want to see things, they want it bigger.
Yeah.
And most of the different, a lot of the advertising things have been optimized for the phone.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be also, again, preparing if people are going to be using their laptop more or their tablet more. How do we handle that? Conversely, stores who think that brick and mortar stores, they need to be thinking, well, what if, this goes to more e-commerce? How do things evolve? Present futurists, thinking about where does AI fit in my business? What things do I need to be considering?
Yeah.
So a lot of the present futurist is just thinking, what are those what if scenarios?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the fashion business, there's not a whole lot of change, for example, in socks.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about, shirts and
Yeah.
collars and suits and lapels and cosmetics or different things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you're in that business, you want to be paying attention to that. What are the influencers doing? If you know that's going to impact your business.
Yeah, I think most businesses are doing it. I mean, it's a part of managing a company, isn't it? To see what trends are out there and how to make sales in respect to the others.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and part of being a present futurist is not to be complacent. Don't get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think you're too big. Nothing can, nothing can knock you off your pedestal.
Yeah.
A lot can.
Mm-hmm.
People, initially said, oh, Google's so big. Who could possibly compete with Google? Well, some of the AIs are, competing with Google.
Mm-hmm.
Different platforms are taking part of their business. They're not getting all their business, but it's certainly, what Google thought was going to happen 10 years ago is different than what Google thinks is going to happen now.
Yeah, of course. Everything is developing, and it's being too cocky to believe that that you have a grasp of it all. And yeah, you're right, that nobody's going to take you off your pedestal.
Well, and the thing is, sometimes it's not just, is somebody bigger than you. It's somebody faster than you.
Right.
It's somebody more agile than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, each of those things become important.
Fantastic discussion, Jay. I appreciate it very much. It was really interesting. Where can people find you if they want to get to know more about your work or get in touch with you?
Sure. So first thing, connect with me on LinkedIn. So you just put in Jay Weiser, I'll show up pretty high on that list. Or if you Google Jay Weiser, I'll show up very high on that list.
Yeah, I Googled you. You were number one on the list in Google. So Jay Weiser, the first link, you're there.
So the second thing, my website is Jay Weiser, so JayWeiser.com. So first and last name. And the third thing is they can email me, jay@jayweiser.com. So any of those three will work. I offer a free 30-minute discovery call initial consultation. I mean, it's a great opportunity, one, for someone to share their challenges. I want to hear what's happening. And then we together will work on, what are some initial steps that the client, can take. Even without me, they'll come away with a couple of ideas. And if there's a way that I can help, they'll hear about that too.
Yeah. How do you normally work with clients once they take you on board? What happens?
So, the first thing is getting a lay of the land, what's happening inside the company. Because everybody starts at a different place. So it's kind of understanding where they're starting from. Where do they want to get to? Is this an educational thing? Is this, a larger culture type change issue? getting that executive team together. Who are the people who need to be on the team? Who has to buy into this? Who's sponsoring it? I think is really important. So it's understanding the organization. It's educating the organization, understanding where the gaps are and building plans to close the gaps. It's a very collaborative model that they don't want me around forever. They want to know how to do this themselves, and that's what I help them do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this conversation. I enjoyed it. It was eye-opening on a lot of aspects that I haven't thought about. And thank you for also giving examples and describing in detail the 5 superpowers of a leader.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business, as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us, and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.